Okay, here's a quick tutorial on your Tiny Web database in App Inventor 2. So if you are on our website, underneath in the home section here, down to week 4, Mole Mash with TinyWebDB. So let's open that up here. So reading through this, last time we worked on a database using the Mole Mash application to store data and persist it between uses of your application. So that's one way that we can store data. We also have a different way using a web database. So we can keep track of scores amongst other players as well, not using just particularly this device, but anybody playing that application. So the objectives today, we're going to talk a little bit about we're going to create an app that shares the highest score among several players. We understand the concept of sharing web data, grasp the difference between synchronous and asynchronous operations, access App Inventor's simple TinyWebDB component. Watch this quick video to give you a preview of what we are going to be doing. All right, so we do need to get in our template here. So once you select this, it's going to open up App Inventor and it's going to import the template for your TinyWebDB. There we go. Very similar to what we looked at last time. We have blocks editor components all here. I'm going to clean those up a little bit. So a lot of things going on here, and we're going to go through most of that today. So back into our tutorial here. What we're wanting to do is to not only store the score for the user, but also store it on a database so that other players can compare their best scores amongst themselves. So the TinyWebDB is a non-visible component that can be used to store data and retrieve data values in a database located on the web, hence its name, and it is under storage category. We do need to locate a database in which we are going to be saving our information to, and this is that database right there, that link. So let's go see if we have that in our application already. So we have underneath storage, you can see that we have these various areas to store, our means of storing. TinyWebDB is already dragged in here, so we have access to that. Let's check and see if we have a database stored. It looks like the database is not the one we want to use. So we want to go in here and copy and paste this particular one right there. You can see it says CS501. And I know that I look here and I see CPS C110. So that's not right. So I'm going to change that out. And it is very important that you get that 100% correct. Now this brings up the database, and we're going to go into that a little bit later. We'll check to see what gets stored underneath the hood in a web database service. So we can search for a tag and get a value a little bit later. Okay, so the code walkthrough, we're going to be revisiting the button save, click, and the welcome user blocks. And you'll be coding 2 new event handlers for the TinyWebDB. We have a got value and a value stored blocks. So retrieving data asynchronously from the TinyWebDB. The way we're going to do that is we're going to get your TinyWeb database. We have a get value method and a tag. Recommending that we put in there the tag Android Mash top score. Actually, a good tag name would be your name dash Android Mash top score. So let's build that real quick. Okay, so that is your method, and here is going to be a good tag name would be your name. All right, well, let's just hold on to that for a little bit and see what they want us to do with that. Okay, next we need to be initializing a global variable, and there are a couple advantages to doing it in a variable approach because we will be using this tag in more than one place. If we ever decide to change the tag, we only have to go back up here and change it where we initialize that global variable. And as well, then it's a little easier to make, or it's a little less easier to, or there's less error prone. That's what I say. If we mistype the string Android Mash top score, nothing will be retrieved, and it'll be difficult to find that error because we simply maybe missed a letter or a character in there. So we want to use a variable in this particular example here. It's very important. Also noting that the way that they've had this variable named, it's all in capital letters. And this is a convention used by programmers to identify constant variables that usually don't change, maybe like days of the week, things of that nature that are not going to ever change. So we would use that pretty much to kind of keep that as a constant. And this is also an example of self-documenting your programming because other programmers will know when they see all caps, that is a final variable. The difference between synchronous and asynchronous retrieval. You can see that looking at your get values from your database and your web database are a little bit different. This here is an expression that's going to be able to be clicked in and retrieved immediately. This is going to be like synchronous retrieval. It's done at the same time. So I can maybe evaluate a variable based upon what's in that database, and I can do that on the immediately. It's synchronous, and it attaches here. Whereas this WebDB is going to be more asynchronous because what we need to do is that we need to search something over the web, and it doesn't take long, maybe a few milliseconds, but that is not the same as at the same time. So synchronous being at the same time, asynchronous being not at the same time. So okay, so that would be a little bit of a difference between the two methods. Let's take a look at our TinyWebDB.got value. Looks like we may need to work on the code for that one here. I don't see it in the template. So let's build that next. Over here, you will find your TinyWeb database. We're going to have the event that there may be a value, and we need to handle that event. And these here are going to be nice to get the value, the tag, and the value that is going to be stored inside of our web database. These little access points would be very nice. We have a nested if-then loop. If-then loop. The first one is going to compare to the tag from your web database to see if it equals the universal score tag. That's the first comparison we need to make. In all that discussion we're talking about variables, I forgot to assign my a variable, this initialized global universal tag score, to my name dash Android mash top score, and then I'm able to get that information back from my WebDB. So we need to go in there and encode this up. And this is going to be in caps because it is a final variable. Universal underscore score underscore tag. And it is going to be set to this value right here. And then I am then having the ability to access this variable in here. I may be using that here shortly, but I do need to have that comparison being made. So we're also going to do another comparison right here. So we have multiple conditions before we store our values in our web database. The next one is going to check to see that the value, to see that there is something inside of our database to make sure that whether or not there's information previously stored. So we would look for any other strings of characters, any other words or tags that might be inside of our database. So first we need to see if it is empty. So we get values from our WebDB, and to make sure that it is not empty. Okay, so if there is a value in there, then we need to update that. We set our global top universal score to get that value from our WebDB. And then we need to have a procedure to update universal score. Okay, so we have our got value method finished. We're now going to be looking at the welcome user procedure. As we see here, this is what we were given with our last program and this one as well, but now we need to add a little bit to that. As you can see here, we have a new component going into the welcome user procedure to call our web database. So we need to add that piece into our program. So under welcome user, we need to get values from our TinyWebDB. And what we will be pulling is from that variable there. Any information that's stored in that variable, the universal score tag. So this will now be the first thing that they do. The first thing that happens in that welcome user procedure is we're going to get any values that we have stored in our web database. So there should be a label available for us to use. Label universal score.text to have the highest score in the world is to get the top universal score. Let's take a look at that under designer. So it is not visible at the time. It just has those three dots down there. So that we will check to see if that gets updated. Those three dots get updated when our universal scores come out, or the top score in the world comes out. Let's make sure that we have this universal score procedure. It is right here. So we have that set up, ready to go for us. So we need to store data in our WebDB, and we need to do that in the button save procedure. So if we look down here, we can see our button save. Here is our new addition here to our button save is this if then else. We have the so we're going to be storing the information in our own database, we are also going to be storing it in the TinyWebDB that we have just put in. So let's code that up. It's on your button save.click method. So we go in here to the button save.click right here, and underneath your global highest score, we are going to add an if then call or control statement. And we're going to check to see that maybe our global score is the best in the world, and we need to update that information that's stored and update it as we play. So the next one we need to do is a comparison check to see if our score is better than the highest score in the world. And so if we have the highest score on our machine as well as possibly the highest score in the universe, we should store that. The tag that we are going to be using is this get global. No, it's the final score, so it's all in caps. And the value to be stored is this global score right here. And then after that is all said and done, we call reset, which will then call our update score and our welcome user procedure. So we should test it out a little bit, make sure you're making, and we can go into this database here, which is again just this link, and see what we have stored in there. So I'm going to run this app a couple times and get something for us to look at. I did notice that our universal score was not popping up. These dots that were right here, I wasn't able to see anything on that. So I noted that we missed out on a procedure here. So following the storing of our web information, we'd also need to call this update universal score, which is this procedure down here that will update our label to say the highest score in the world is that score. So let's connect our app to the emulator. Okay, so let's try this out. I'm going to go with my name, Bob. Start game. Nice. It is looking like it is working well. I have a report back that my highest score is 24 and that the highest score in the world is 24. Let's try and beat that and see if this works. One. Okay, my score is 25. I hit save score. Your new high score is 25. And when I hit reset, it updates to say that the highest score in the world is 25. Let's refresh our app and make sure that it works. And again, it does. It holds on to the world's, it holds on to not only the device's score, but a comparable score amongst the world. So let's go in and test our App Inventor database. Okay, so we're on this App Inventor web database service. The tag that we're going to be looking for, remember we had our last name, dash Android Mash top score. So we search that, we get our value to see if it's stored, and it is 25. So we are using the web database to store information over the web and then retrieving it through your application. That's pretty neat. Now on the bottom down here is an enhancement piece that you should try to do. Use the TinyWebDB to store and retrieve the name of the player with the top universal score. Hint, you don't need a second TinyWebDB for this project. You just need a second tag, mole mash top name. Don't forget to display the player's top name in the score app. So we want to give that a shot to enhance this. Try it out. Non-graded, but nonetheless very, very important that you stretch your abilities. And then think about these questions. Again, non-graded questions. Just again, think about describe the difference between synchronous and asynchronous data storage and retrieval, and then 2, describe the process of storing and retrieving a value from a TinyWebDB. Consider what information and blocks are needed. Okay, so that's a quick little run through for your mole mash with your TinyWebDB database. Thank you.